Okay, members, call the meeting to order here just. Just ask Karen now to take the attendance, please. Or notice someone's a meeting first, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To all members of Environment and Regeneration Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of Environment and Regeneration Committee to be held in the Council Chamber, Guildhall, on the 15th of May at 4 p.m. And I'll take the attendance. Alderman Derek Hussey.
Aye.
Alderman Keith Kerrigan. Apologies. Alderman Julie Middleton.
Here.
Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Councillor John Boyle. Councillor Caitlin Deaney.
Yeah.
Councillor Alex Duffy. Councillor Brian Hart.
And Shaw.
Councillor Emma McGinley has given apologies. Yeah. Councillor Rory McHugh.
Yeah.
Councillor Patrick Murphy. Councillor Declan Norris.
Apologies for Declan.
Jeez, okay. And Councillor Mike Martin Riley.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I'll just read out the broadcast statement. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. If you're seated in the lower public seating or media areas, it is possible that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. By entering the council chamber and using the press or lower public seating area, you're consenting to being filmed and consenting to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. If you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. A copy of the council privacy notice may be found on the council website, www.derrystrabane.com. Item 4, members, is declarations of members' interests. Anybody wish to make a declaration now? If not, they can do so during the course of the meeting. So that then takes us to item 5, members, which is to receive a presentation from Debbie Nesbitt and Hannah Blair, and it's the RAP support to Derry City and Strabane District Council. So go ahead, ladies, and just to welcome you.
Thank you. My name is Debbie Nesbitt and I am a sector specialist with RAP in the Policy and Insights team, and I'm here today with my colleague. She's a senior analyst, Hannah Blair, and she's also in the Policy and Insights team. And this work was also supported by Ruth Hunter, who is a local authority technical consultant within RAP, and DERA provide funding to RAP to the local authority technical consultancy team to support councils across Northern Ireland in relation to technical support that would help them move forward with the department's aims and objectives, specifically in relation to waste and recycling. Next slide, please. So the RAP support I'm here to talk about today is the options appraisal modelling that we did for Derry City and Strabane District Council in relation to household collection service. So officers from the council approached RAP for support in relation to modelling alternative waste collection options. It was sort of on the back of a series of engagements that the department, supported by RAP, had done with councils in Northern Ireland, and in relation to the change in policy landscape in Northern Ireland, which is really shifting towards the Northern Ireland Executive's multi-decade strategy on green growth. So it's really about balancing climate, the environment and the economy in Northern Ireland and trying to tackle the climate crisis in the right way. So as part of this work, we did look at the performance of the various options that we're going to talk about, the cost implications, and also the carbon impact associated with that. And I just have to say thanks to Connor, Nicola and Niall and the council for helping us along the process, agreeing the assumptions, providing data, and coming to these key outputs across each of the stages. Yeah, next slide, please. So I just want to set out quickly some of the key drivers that's informing this work. I understand you're going to have maybe a workshop with the council in relation to the DERA consultation that's currently out, which is rethinking our resources. And I wanted to briefly cover that because it's very important in the whole scheme of the work that we are doing. The department have put forward proposals to transform household waste collections across Northern Ireland, and they have 3 or 4 key proposals relative to this work. They are restricting residual waste capacity across Northern Ireland, enhancing recycling, introducing a minimum service standard across Northern Ireland, which would mean that a move away from commingled collections to a 2-stream collection system, and that you would have to separate out glass or fibres from the other materials in the current commingled bin. And also it's about having a core set of materials being recycled across Northern Ireland with full coverage to all households and all properties. In relation to recycling targets, we have got the Climate Change Act recycling target of 70% to meet by 2030, but the department hasn't clarified what will be included in this target to meet the 70%. But we do know that the Waste and Contaminated Land Order requires councils to recycle municipal waste. The recycling rate target is 55% by 2025, increasing to 60% by 2030, 65% by 2035. And also there is a cap of 10% on the amount of waste sent to landfill by 2035. So that's really leads us to the piece of work that the department have also been doing to ban or restrict biodegradable waste entering landfill sites, potentially by 2026, but we don't have any detail on this. We're awaiting the publication of the waste management strategy in relation to that. But we know that the department are placing more onus on the carbon impact, and potentially are talking about a carbon metric, and really want people to consider the end destination and the sustainable and efficient use of resources. So that's just to put some of the key drivers and things to think about in the background as we go through this report. Next slide, please. So key to what we're going to talk about are the 4 scenarios that we looked at modelling. All scenarios, I should say, do look at the restriction of residual waste. The first scenario looks at doing that on a 3-weekly collection, still with the 240 litre bin. It looks at the minimum of the minimum service standard of twin stream, and we look at glass in a separate to 120 litre bin, and that would be collected on a fortnightly basis, with the rest of the material still collected fortnightly in the 240 litre bin. And it looks at the organics fully commingled on a fortnightly basis, with the provision of a kitchen caddy to all households as well. Scenario 2 still looks at restriction of residual waste, but that's a smaller bin, 180 litre bin fortnightly. It looks at fully commingled, still the same system in place, and still the same system in relation to the organics. Scenario 3 is the restriction of residual waste fortnightly via the 180 litre bin. It is the introduction of separately collected recyclables via a weekly multi-stream collection. And then you can see again with organics. And scenario 4 is still a restriction of residual waste via the 180 litre bin. And then the proposal is for a larger 360 litre bin for the dry recyclates, with the insert to have the glass separately. So it's a glass insert for the glass. So that also is the twin stream collection. So try and keep those in mind as we go through. And if you have the report available, I think it's on table 1 on page 4 when we're talking about the outputs of each of these scenarios. So I'll hand you over to Hannah now.
Just next slide, please. So the modelling was completed using the curbside analysis tool, which is called CAT. It was initially developed in 2004 to model recycling and residual waste collection services. And it has undergone some updates since then to become an established model used extensively by local authorities when modelling potential service changes. So the modelling works by establishing a baseline that reflects your current service. To establish this, we work with Niall, Nicola and Connor to incorporate the council's current operations into that baseline. And as Debbie said, we were able to set up and get sign off on the model's assumptions, some of which are listed out on this slide. So for instance, the number of vehicles, staff, unit costs for vehicles and containers and that sort of thing. So the baseline modelling requires calibrating known inputs such as the amount of waste collected and the number of households served to known outputs such as the number of vehicles and the number of crew required to deliver these services. So aligning these to Derry City and Strabane District Council's current residual waste collection, we were able to create a baseline that was reflective of your current service. So from this baseline, we're then able to project like modeled resource requirements for the scenarios, which then take into account those local circumstances. But what I do just want to flag is this modelling only takes into account the curbside collections. So super rural and communal collections are excluded from the modelling as these quite often require more specialised collections. I also want to highlight that CAT modelling is relative and based on the baseline service. So if efficiency savings could be made in the baseline, those could also be made in the future scenarios. So it's the cost and performance differences between the outputs and the baseline that are more relevant rather than like the absolute numbers, because CAT wasn't developed for round routing. And in the event that a service change was to be implemented, a separate round routing exercise would be needed and then the associated costs accounted for. But in the next section, I will talk you through the performance outputs from the modelling. Next slide, please. And then next one again, sorry, that just highlights some of the things I'm going to talk about. Yeah, so the council's curbside recycling rate is projected to increase across all scenarios. So the major contribution for this is the reduction in residual waste and associated diversion to the dry recycling as a result of the reduction in the capacity of the residual bins or extending the frequency of their collection. Scenario 3 sees the highest uptick in recycling performance at 55%, with the weekly multi-stream, separate food and 180 litre residual waste collection. And then you will see scenarios 1 and 4 have the same recycling rate because they're the twin stream service. The only difference being scenario 1 has the 3 weekly residual collection and scenario 4 has the fortnightly with the 180 litre bin. And then scenario 2, get myself muddled, is the commingled collection, similar to as you're doing now, but with the restricted residual. I do just want to flag that in scenario 3, it may look like the amount of organic waste decreases. It's just the blue column, or the dark blue column, I should say. It does not, in fact, the way the modelling works is because food is co-collected with the dry, the tonnage associated with that is added on there. So we're not seeing a drop off in the amount of organic waste, it's just recategorized in a different section. There is no change to the projected outputs between scenarios 1 and 4 with the different size containers or the changes in frequency. So yeah, that just is quite high level, showing you the outputs across all of the scenarios and shows you the baseline as well. Next slide, please. So again, like Debbie said, we looked at the carbon impact of each of the scenarios modelled. So we used RAP's carbon waste and resources metric, so it's called the carbon warm, to calculate the projected greenhouse gas emissions as measured in tonnes of CO2 equivalent. So restricting the capacity of residual waste collections alongside the separate collection of recycling and food waste in scenario 3 was found to have the greatest impact, reducing emissions from 5,400 tonnes to 630 tonnes per year. So that works out at about 158% reduction in CO2 equivalent and is more than double that of the two-stream dry recycling with glass collected separately options, just sort of that change from the baseline. And scenario 2, whilst applying a restriction in residual waste, sees the lowest reduction because the recycling continues to be collected commingled. And yet the variation between 1 and 4 is that variation in the residual frequency and the amount of food waste and dry recyclables collected. When we're looking at this specifically in terms of tons of waste diverted from landfill, scenario 1 sees a reduction of almost 5,500 tons. Scenario 2, 5,800 tons. Scenario 3, 7,000 tons, and scenario 4, 5,400 tons. So if we just skip to the next slide, I will take you through some of the model costs as well. So as you can see, we look at the collection costs, the disposal costs, the annual whole system costs, so those two combined, as well as consideration for the capital costs required for new containers. So we just pop to the next one, please. So yeah, we'll start with the collection costs. So all 4 modeled scenarios do forecast an increase in annual collection costs. This ranges from £156,000 to almost £2 million, primarily as a result of changes to the dry recycling service and the increase in costs associated with the increase in vehicles, the increase in staff, that sort of thing. So the current service operates a fleet of 25 vehicles, including spares. For comparison, scenario 1 would require an increase of 3 vehicles, so 28. Scenario 2 would be a reduction of 2 vehicles and take us down to 23. Scenario 3 is an increase of 10 vehicles up to 35. And then scenario 4 would be an increase of 1 up to 26. So in scenario 1, the projected increase in collection costs has been partially offset when compared to the other scenarios due to the savings resulting from the reduced frequency of collection, so from fortnightly to 3 weekly. And scenario 3 has the highest projected cost increase compared to the other scenarios due to the higher number of resource recovery vehicles required for that weekly service. And that also does incorporate the separate food element collected as well, which is collected alongside the dry on the same vehicle. So the projected capital costs of the vehicles are included as annualized costs in these collection costs. However, the capital costs of any new containers required are not. I should say that annual replacements for damaged or lost containers are included in this, but the actual outright purchase of the containers is not, but I will touch on that in a slide or two. Next slide, please. So then, yeah, the disposal costs. So this is the material that is incurring a cost for disposal or an income. So all 4 scenarios are projected to deliver savings in residual disposal when compared to the baseline. The savings are a direct result of the reductions in the amount of residual waste going to landfill through restrictions placed on the residual collection through the reduced frequency in scenario 1 and the restricted capacity in scenarios 2 through 4. Scenario 3 sees the greatest projected disposal savings from the residual and also substantially reduced processing and haulage costs due to the separate collections of the materials. Income is modelled as being generated on the separately collected fractions of the dry recycling stream. So for scenarios 1 and 4 on the twin stream glass, that glass collected in a separate container is or will earn income, where the multi-stream collections in scenario 3, every part of that waste stream then earns income. And for scenario 2, there is no income generated. So then move on to the next one, please. The whole system cost is essentially the collection and disposal costs combined. So we see that scenario 2 is projected to deliver overall annual savings of around £200,000. Scenario 1 and 4 have projected increases relative to the baseline of around £360,000 and £270,000 respectively. And scenario 3 is projected to deliver the largest overall annual savings of around £490,000. It is important to note that evidence from elsewhere in the UK suggests that the inclusion of food waste on a weekly provision alongside a multi-stream collection can reduce the overall collection and disposal costs by enabling mixed food and garden waste collections to be replaced by a separately collected garden waste that incurs a lower treatment fee. However, we do recognise that the council would be dependent on removing any existing contracts and that sort of thing. So we have kept the disposal cost the same for that garden waste as the mixed, just so that it's comparable across. And then last slide for me. This looks at the capital container costs for the new scenarios. So it is important to note that within each scenario, there would be an additional capital outlay required to invest in the containers to deliver these to the householder. However, transition costs and communications would not be included within this study. It's not something that we've included within the cost. But RAP understand that DAERA is working with the Northern Irish Councils on a separate project to understand that transition cost associated with potential collection charges. And that could include any such infrastructure related costs. So just quite high level, because we can see the costs on the board there, that scenario 1 would require all householders to be issued with a brand new 120 litre wheel bin for the separately collected glass. For the mixed garden and food, 10,000 properties would require a 240 litre bin, and 7,500 would require a kitchen caddy. For scenario 2, all householders would be required to be issued with a 180 litre wheel bin for the restricted residual on a fortnightly collection. And again, the mixed organics, 10,000 would require a 240 litre bin, and 7,500 would require a kitchen caddy. The 240 litre bins that are currently being used for the residual would then become redundant. And scenario 3 would require all households to be issued with a 180 litre wheel bin for the residual, a triple stacker as well, so the 3 stacked boxes to separate each of the dry materials. 7,500 would require an internal kitchen caddy, and an external kitchen or curbside caddy, would be required for around 38,000 households. And then just again, the 240 litre bins for residual and recycling would then become redundant. And scenario 4 then requires all households to be issued with a 180 litre wheel bin for the residual, a 360 litre bin for the dry recycling and the glass insert, and then again for the mixed organics, 10,000 for a 240 litre bin and 7,500 for the kitchen caddy. So I appreciate that's an awful lot of numbers, and it is quite hard to get your head around. So just to sort of sum it up very briefly, only scenario 1 would actually require additional footprint or storage space for the second wheel bin compared to what the householder currently has. And I will just pass you back to Debbie now.
And maybe it's worthwhile just saying as well that the department has the collaborative change programme available for councils to receive 50% of funding to buy new containers and vehicles as well, I think. Okay, next slide. So just to finish off, we also, as well as looking at the costs, the carbon and the recycling and the tonnages diversion from landfill, we did a qualitative assessment that looked at wider policy themes that we know are coming down the line. We looked at if the scenario would facilitate closed loop recycling, does it contribute to wider Northern Ireland economy and support wider policies, such as the green growth policy that I mentioned? Is it in compliance with TAPE? And does it facilitate, or from what we know, will it facilitate for packaging EPR payments that councils will receive for packaging materials that they are processing? So for scenario 1, we feel in relation to closed loop recycling, it's probably an increased likelihood. We know that when you separate out materials, there's probably an increased likelihood that it can go to closed loop recycling. With scenario 2, there's less separation, so we've said a reduced likelihood. With scenario 3, it's highly likely, and scenario 4, it's still increased. When we look at what's happening currently with Northern Ireland councils, when we look at the data via waste data flow returns on My Recycling NI website, if we look at fully commingled councils, we can see that between 52% up to 86% of paper and card from those councils is sent outside the UK and to the EU. And then for councils that operate a twin stream or a multi-stream, we see that it's lower. It's between 5% to 44%, so slight difference. So that's why we're, coming to this increased likelihood qualitative assessment. All the scenarios align to the Northern Ireland economy wider policy proposals and supports that's out there. In relation to TAPE, which is that's basically under the Circular Economy Amendment regulations. The default position is that you're to collect your recyclables separately unless you can prove that it's technically, economically, environmentally practicable not to do so. But the department in the proposal and the consultation Rethinking Our Resources that's currently out now are rethinking how that TAPE would work, and they have brought in quality into that as well, because quality is enshrined in the Northern Ireland legislation. So they're also thinking about what happens to that waste that you collect at the curbside, and what is it going to closed loop or open loop, and what the quality is like. And they're saying that councils will have to evidence the quality. So we feel that scenario 2 wouldn't be compliant. Scenario 3 would fully comply, and it's likely with scenario 4 and scenario 1 that you would have to still do a written assessment. But we're still awaiting on the outcome of the consultation. It's still live, so we wouldn't really know that until after the consultation response was released. And then in relation to facilitating APR payments, there's a lot about that councils still don't know. DEFRA is in charge of that throughout the UK, and they haven't really made that clear. But we know it's going to be based on model costs for probably year 1 and potentially year 2. But after that, then it's going to be by the producers are basically paying into the scheme. So we feel that where there's more separation and better quality of materials, maybe councils will receive better prices for that through the EPR. But again, we don't know that. We have to wait to find out about that. But generally, when producers of packaging materials will have to meet higher recycling targets, recycling standards for the materials that are placed on the market, it's likely that they'll want better quality products to go back into their products. So that really is the end of that qualitative assessment and the end of our presentation to you. There's a lot of detail in the report, and yeah, I suppose we're open to any questions.
Okay, thank you to Debbie and Hannah for, as you say yourself, a very informative report. I'm going to just ask members now if there's any questions or comments to make. And first indicate was Alderman Hussey. Go ahead, Derek.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So the bottom line is the separation issue with regard to avoiding contamination. I found it quite surprising on a fairly recent trip down to the glass facility in Fermanagh to learn that the glass in our blue recycling bins is absolutely no use to them because it's contaminated. They need the separate collection of glass. So that lies within this. I suppose it also follows on from ER 106 in our minutes of the last meeting when we looked at producer responsibility obligations. Now, within that, we're also aware that the Republic of Ireland are going ahead with the deposit scheme on plastics and cans. I'm not sure if glass is included in there, as I know they're having difficulties at the minute. I don't know why glass wouldn't be included. But there are proposals that will also come into being in Northern Ireland. When that comes into being, big when, I suppose, but when it comes into being, how will that impact on your figures that you're basing the proposals on, with particulars with regard to scenario 3 and the triple bin? That's one point. Second point is, have you any comment to make on the difficulties that will be incurred, particularly in urban areas and older housing estates, with bin storage? And I think those are my two main points. The impact of government regulations coming through and producer responsibility and the return deposit scheme, which I would personally think should be operating ASAP. That will have an impact on the mass of your waste streams. So it obviously impacts on what you're suggesting. And the second one is the storage of bins. I do understand within that, although collection costs will rise, I think disposal costs will fall, and there's sort of a balancing out there that I see within that. But those two issues. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. In relation to the separation of glass, it's sort of true what you're saying. When the glass goes to NSERC, that's purely coming from separate collections in Northern Ireland, but that's only because we don't have the technology in Northern Ireland to deal with the glass when it's coming from the commingled collections. So actually the glass coming from Derry City and Strabane District Council does go for recycling, but it's just not here. It's actually in Belgium or in the EU. So specifically to that question, yes, it's much better for Northern Ireland PLC if it's separately collected, because we can use that within Northern Ireland. We don't have to import glass, call it then, from elsewhere. In relation to the deposit return scheme, that has been announced last week or the week before that is coming in throughout the UK. It does not include glass in Northern Ireland or England. It includes glass in Wales and Scotland, so that's a difference. It actually doesn't include glass in the Republic of Ireland either. And the Republic of Ireland deal with their glass in a separate way. Basically, bins are commingled in the Republic of Ireland, but you're not allowed to put your glass there. You have to take that to bring facilities. And they have good returns in that in the Republic of Ireland. But in terms of modelling for a deposit return within this piece of work, no, we haven't looked at that because when we done this piece of work, it wasn't, announced. We were waiting for that, but it's something that we can, build in and factor in and, let the team know. In relation to the capacity of the bins in the urban and the older housing estates, I think, Hannah, did you say it was only one of the scenarios you needed to have an extra bin, so it would still be the same as what's there?
Yeah, so it's only for scenario 1 that you would require an additional bin. Essentially, at the minute you have 3 bins and then your internal kitchen caddy. So you've got your residual, your organic, and your dry recycling. So in scenarios 2, 3, and 4, that stays the same. Where it's slightly different for scenario 4, you have the glass insert, but that's within the bin and that's put out for collection at the same time. It is a larger bin, so it does ultimately come down to yourselves weighing up how that impacts the householder. It's not something that we can factor into the modelling. It's how you are then able to weigh up the options and the factors that impact your residents and that sort of thing.
I welcome what you've said, and I trust that our officers will welcome the update that you'll give in the new scenario of government proposals, because I think it will impact on costs and bin sizes and all of that sort of thing as we consider how we're taking it forward.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Hussey. And next is Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you to Hannah and Debbie for being here today, for your assessment and appraisal work, which I'm sure took quite some time, and for your detailed and informative presentation. This should help us to shape our efforts in achieving our recycling targets and maintaining them across the district. So we're very thankful for your time and your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Middleton and Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Debbie and Hannah, for coming along this afternoon and for the presentation. Chair, a few points from me, just I suppose in relation to this concept. Totally support the idea of reduce, reuse, recycle, and I suppose part of this today is about the recycling and the reusing, but we can't forget the importance of reducing in the first place and encouraging people not to be purchasing items that they don't need, or buying things that are as sustainable as possible. Take Alderman Hussey's point about the glass and the need to ensure that that is collected. I know that in other places, in other council areas, glass is collected separately. In Belfast, for example, you have an A3 size box and you put your glass in that and it's lifted separately. I suppose that leads me to my first question in terms of the different scenarios that are out there. How close are we to having a consistent picture across all the council areas for this type of collection, because it is confusing for people who travel around from household to household and across council boundaries to see different coloured bins, different types of waste collections. And that just leads people to be confused and unsure about what it is and when it is that their waste gets collected and in what way. I suppose in terms of the council looking to other councils and advice, obviously we're part of APSI and there's opportunities there for council to learn and understand some of the different scenario modelling from other councils that have rolled out some of the different types of bins. I see that from the presentation, scenario 3 has 4 green boxes on the slide where they're all been assessed. There's different costings for each one, obviously, but in that scenario, it is the one that has 3 different drawers in the bin that's collected weekly. And I'm wondering if officers have calculated in the time that our council staff would have to do to give to emptying those 3 drawers, because currently that would be a lot longer than where we're at the moment in terms of everything being collected in one blue bin. So has that been factored into the implications of this? And I suppose a couple of questions as well, Chair, just in relation to if we were to go down the line of having procurement of new bins, is there any revenue we can get from the existing stock of bins that households have, if they're being collected, or any of the costs for that collection to be associated then with the procurement of new stuff? And finally, from me, Chair, just in relation to the costings in this, I suppose part of it is getting better clarification as things roll on from DAERA as to any of the capital costs for the new purchases where council can assist in that. I think it is a good concept, certainly, to be maximising the value out of waste and ensuring that all the things that are collected and diverted from landfill are given their best life again. And I suppose in relation to rolling it out, are we looking at new housing developments, new housing areas where people are entering new homes? Are they the places that we're thinking of starting off pilot programs to test some of these new models? Thanks, Chair, and thanks again for the presentations.
Okay, in relation to some of your points, so the department would really like more consistency throughout Northern Ireland. I guess that's how this piece of work with the department started off with, and that's why they've issued the Rethinking Our Resources consultation, and why they're proposing a core set of materials across Northern Ireland, and the mandating the minimum service standard. Because councils throughout Northern Ireland are very different, they've got different rurality, different makeup. It was the consensus of the councils when the department were, speaking with them, that they would make up their own minds on how they would roll it out so that the department wouldn't be as specific. So I don't believe the department will be specifically saying you have to do it a specific way, you have to have a colour of bin. That's up to each independent council themselves. In terms of potential costings for the capital elements like the bins and the vehicles, there is the collaborative change programme that DERA runs. They've only opened it up quite recently. I'm sure officers will be able to speak more about that. And then you'd mentioned about the time taken to empty the curbside boxes. So the CAP model that we did this work on is very detailed. It has timings, it has timings when you stop at the household walk-in to get the bin empty on it. And we have, specific timings in there in relation to emptying out. That's all costed within the model. And it's actually done, you could do it based on timings with a private contractor, but we didn't. We done it in costings with council, council staff. So there's differences, and that has been included in it.
Okay, I think Connor, our council officer, would like to address some of those queries as well. Just Martin.
Yeah, just in terms of, I think, as Debbie and Hannah have alluded to, the department have this consultation ongoing at the moment in terms of rethinking our resources, and they're specifically seeking councils and members' comments with regard to all of the issues in terms of whether it's a smaller black bin, it's a 3 weekly collection, and I suppose arrangements with regard to the range of materials that are collected and standardising those elements of it to take out some of that confusion. Whereas councils can decide, I suppose, on the type of bin that might be used, but they're looking to ensure that no matter where you are, you're provided with the same range of materials that can be recycled to remove that confusion. And the workshop tomorrow with members is to try and work through some of those, I suppose, key questions to formulate our response to that. And again, as Hannah's referred to, the additional cost for the curbside sort reflects that you need additional crews and vehicles, to make up for the time and difference. So that's where some of the additional cost comes in, offset by some of the other benefits in terms of disposal costs and so on. So all of that's been factored into this process. But I think key to this at the moment is the consultation that's out there, and important that we get members' feedback from that. And we intend to bring a report into this committee prior to send responding to the consultation by the 27th of June. I suppose the final bit, just in terms of that, is we are awaiting the revised waste strategy from the department, and councils have been lobbying for a greater focus on waste prevention, as we see that as key to, if the waste isn't produced in the first place, then councils don't have to deal with it and it doesn't become an issue. So we're waiting to see what's included in that in terms of those wider kind of policy interventions that the department will bring forward.
Okay, thank you, Connor. And have Councillor Deeney.
Gormilga Chair. So it was just to say Gormilga for the presentation, Hannah and Debbie. I found it really informative. As you say, the curbside collection is going to increase, so we need to keep up while reducing our emissions and cutting our costs also. So anything we can do to reduce waste going to landfill and reducing our carbon impact is massively welcome to reach our targets. The consistency was a great point from Councillor Riley, and thank you, Connor, for clarifying that as well. So that would be great, obviously, if that was the way it rolled out. And just to say, basically, I'm looking forward to the completion of the exercise to identify the preferred option, because that was really informative. I feel really good about it now. So thank you.
Okay, members, I have no other indicated councillor who wishes to ask a question or make a comment. So I just want to, as chair of the committee, once again, thanks Debbie and Hannah for attending today and providing the committee with a very informative presentation for a very important issue, not just to this council, but for councils across the north. So thanks again and safe journey home. All right. Yeah. Okay, members, we'll move on now. Item 6 is chair's business. I have no direct personal chair's business unless there's no other member had contacted me, so she's about happy with that. Item 7 is the matters arising from the previous minutes of last month's meeting, so I'll just take them out of face. Pages 21 to 34. Any matters arising? Alderman Hussey.
Good Chair, I have two items. 101 Kiln Play Park. I kind of welcome the cleanup that is taking place there, but access hasn't been sorted out yet. And is there any result of the assessment of the equipment as to its suitability for continued use? And secondly, is there any update on engagement with the local community association there? Because myself and Councillor Kerrigan were at an event, and I was getting some negative vibes as to a lack of engagement with the community association. And you know, the play park is actually based within their tenure, their grounds. So it's the issue: is access being sorted? When's that going to be available for the youngsters of Kiln? We're moving into the summer. Obviously, that needs to be looked at. The assessment of the equipment and engagement with the local community association. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. I'm going to bring in Alderman Kerrigan, presume is on the same issue, and then I think Colin maybe probably want to address it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's same 101-24. Kiln, again, welcome the work that's been done. That 8-foot bush is gone. And as I say, it's a good improvement. But again, the concerns as well is the equipment suitable. I think there's a couple of items had been set aside whenever we were in at that meeting, Derek. But it's just a query on it then as well. I know from that meeting with the community association, and I know the site is now within council's hands, but it was envisaged that there would be no vehicles, no vans, as in regards to the access. There would be no vehicles sitting there. So at the meantime, I know we want to sort out a proper access in from the road, and there was talk of a pathway coming in there, a secure pathway, but it could be, if the equipment's up to standard, there's no reason why the gate couldn't be open now and left for the children to come in and play on it. Because, as I say, if the community association is stating the vans aren't to be in that section currently, they're not to be in that. So, as I say, that was a real concern at that stage because of the vehicles around there and the movement of them with children and getting access. So.
Okay, through you, Chair, in response to the three questions asked, thanks to Connor and Desi and the team in terms of going in there and clean up the site initially. So it gives us a very clear picture of what we have. In addition to the play equipment, it is proposed to replace a number of the items that are basically deteriorators, and that equipment will come from the former Castle Park site. We all understand that some items of equipment were removed for that as part of the Derg Active GI regeneration there. So those things are in store. So Desi's moving to procure that. I suppose the next key stages is that Desi's going out to procure in terms of the access into the site. And that is, I understand that's to happen over May, and we'll come back with an update as to when those works can be completed. And then finally, in terms of engagement with the local community group, I know that Leanne Thompson, as part of the GI team, is in contact with Leslie, and there was discussions about meeting them later on in terms of, so we've had regular communication with them, at the various different stages throughout the regeneration of this space, with the view that we also want to pick up a wider conversation with them, as members appreciate that the play area in Killen is not best located, so we want to pick up a wider conversation and look at other sites in the longer term that we can look at it for a longer term solution.
Thanks for that, Chair. I was actually getting negative vibes with regard to other sites from the community association. So, perhaps that's part of the engagement. They are the community association. And I think it's fair to say they do represent the bulk of the population of the village. So hopefully that can be addressed. To add a second item, 104, the service plan. Within that, I had asked about contact with Strabane Royal British Legion. I just wondered, has contact been made with Strabane Royal British Legion? And I have a second point in that section as well.
Chair, members, I'm not aware if we have yet. Oh, sorry. Yeah, not. Would you want to answer?
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't made contact just yet. We're working through some elements of the, so we're not at the stage of the letter of offer just yet, Alderman Hussey, but we are working through a list of contacts now. We're being advised that the letter of offer for that programme will be imminent now over the next few weeks. And I think that once we have that, it gives us a greater sense of certainty to engage with not just the Strabane Legion members, but indeed the other ones as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's welcome. I know that, as I said at the last meeting, they have plans for their 100th anniversary and they want to tie in with whatever may be going on there. The other point within that was I had a query about bus shelters, and I went back and looked. I couldn't find bus shelters. I eventually found bus shelters in the longer report under postal numbering and street naming. And noted that we hadn't built any last year, but there had been one refurbishment. Can I ask who should you contact with regard to refurbishment? I've a query about a very old one. It's one of the old Enterprise Ulster ones, which is in a Dyer Street. So who do we contact in regard to that? Thank you.
Through Chair, members, if anyone has any queries, just come through Connor and the relevant officer, can speak to you.
Okay, Martin, Councillor Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just from the minutes of the previous meeting, ER 109/24, it's the disabled parking base, and I think, Karen, you were to write to the department in relation to clarification on their budget for that, because across the council area, indeed, on my way here today, I had to stop off outside the Playhouse, and there's a disabled parking bay there that has nearly all worn away. So it is clarification, I think, needed from the department as to their budget for repainting existing disabled parking bays that exist across the council area, as well as obviously granting new ones when and where they're required, because there's clearly an issue for people who have a disabled parking bay already granted to them outside their home, but it is worn away and hasn't been repainted, and therefore is losing its value. So any update on that, Karen, would be appreciated. Thank you.
I haven't got an update today, but I'll find out and come back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, members, nobody else indicated for any matters arising. So that takes us then to item 8, and that's the fountain dereliction, and Tony's taking that one for us.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the report's really to provide an update in relation to the establishment of the Fountain Dereliction Task Force and the advice on suggested representation and next steps. Members, you recall from paragraph 2.1 of the report and recall of the notice of motion endorsed by full council at its February 2024 meeting, and the notice of motion had highlighted the council will establish a task force to address issues being experienced by the community in the fountain as a result of the buildings left derelict and in an unsafe state. The task force should comprise of community representatives, elected members, council officers, housing executive and any other relevant departments or building owners, and that the council remains committed to developing our local communities to be the best they can in conjunction with the local communities. And that was the actual notice of motion that had been adopted. Since the endorsement of the notice of motion, officers have been identifying relevant internal resources to assist now with the management and coordination of the task force itself. Officers from the Environment and Regeneration Department have been assigned to take forward this particular role. Now that the internal resourcing has been confirmed, the assigned officers have been conducting some initial research and engagement in order to gain a more detailed understanding of the background to the notice of motion and the general issues relating to dereliction in and around the fountain area. As part of the exercise, officers have engaged directly with the elected members who proposed the notice of motion, in addition to some preliminary engagement with stakeholders. Beyond this engagement, officers are keen to ensure that the task force is as representative as is practical in terms of relevant stakeholders considered to have an operational role and interest in working collaboratively to actively tackling dereliction in the area. It should be noted that generally the matter of tackling dereliction and vacancy extends beyond the council and will require a multi-partner and multi-agency approach involving other relevant stakeholders. In line with the membership and composition of other council-led task forces, for example, the Glenone Estate Task Force, officers are suggesting the following stakeholders to join the Fountain Dereliction Task Force. We summarise those in paragraph 3.4 in terms of council members, relevant departments within council, the Housing Executive, Department for Communities in terms of urban regeneration, the Executive Office, Urban Villages, Cathedral Youth Club, Northwest Cultural Partnership, Triax Neighbourhood Renewal Partnership, and City Centre Initiative. And the above is an indicative and suggested list of core members of the task force for your consideration, members, and is not exhaustive. Members, you may wish to suggest other stakeholders who are not currently included on this suggested list, and members should note that there will be scope for the owners of derelict properties to be invited to attend meetings as well to discuss any specific matters relating to their buildings and to receive an update on the work of the task force. Subject to your approval, members, officers are proposing to convene the initial meeting of the task force in June, and that date is yet to be confirmed, and obviously will follow subject ratification to council. In advance of the meeting, officers are currently preparing a draft terms of reference for the task force. The terms of reference will assist the task force in defining its role, purpose, key objectives over the short, medium and long term. In addition, officers are preparing some mapping information highlighting the extent of dereliction within the Fountain area, and which will be distributed at the initial meeting also for consideration and comment, and I guess to understand the scale of the particular issue and the actual locational areas where dereliction is most prevalent. In terms of obviously implications, in terms of 4.1 under equality, rural needs, climate change and data protection, none yet have been identified. However, we anticipate as we work forward with the task force that there may well be. From a financial, legal and HR perspective, apart from internal staffing, there are no direct operational costs to council associated with the coordination and indeed management of the task force. As part of the work of the task force, additional resource requirements may be necessary to undertake tasks such as technical surveys, etc. There are no confirmed council budgets available to support those particular tasks should these arise. However, we would propose that we would work collaboratively with the relevant stakeholders to assist collectively in identifying the suitable resources to undertake the key work elements and work programme of the task force. So members, as I move towards the recommendation, I ask you to note the contents of the report and to seek your nomination of party representatives to be part of the Fountain Dereliction Task Force, and indeed any other stakeholders that may not necessarily be included on this particular list. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, and Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm not a member of committee, but thanks for letting me in anyway. It's just to welcome the report, Tony, and thanks very much for giving us all that detail, and to thank you for your work that has been done to date. I can't nominate, I don't think, any member because I'm not a member of this committee, so Alex Duffy will do that on our behalf, but it's just to say that this is the first step. The success of the Glenone Task Force is evident in the work that has been done to date. So I think the decision to bring a dereliction task force for the Fountain was a very good decision. It's in its early stages and we are really looking forward to getting around the table with the relevant bodies in order to tackle what's currently going on there. So just to say thanks for the work to date, and we're looking forward to the work going forward.
Thank you, Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, Tony, for bringing forward the update. This is such a good and positive first step, so we're really pleased to hear of the updates. As a party, we would wish to nominate Alderman Nairee McMorris for the task force. Thank you.
And Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and can I congratulate officers on turning around a notice of motion into action in a fairly short period of time, because we have heard criticism in the past that motions have sat there for a while. So it's actually good to see this motion, the recommendation coming. Can I propose the recommendation? I don't think anybody's actually proposed it. And Alderman Guy would be the Ulster Unionist Party. Oh, sorry. Alderman Guy would be the nomination from the Ulster Unionist Party.
Okay, and next speaker is Alderman Kerrigan.
Just a declaration of interest in regards to the Housing Council, in regards to the work with the Housing Executive.
Declaration, sorry, could you just repeat that?
A declaration of interest as in the groups that you're going to be working with there, part of the Housing Council and the Housing Executive, just.
No problem. Next indicated speaker is Councillor Duffy.
Just to thank officers again, and also to nominate Aisling and Emma, our two councillors. I'm not DA.
That's nomination from Sinn Féin for Councillor Hutton and Councillor Deeney, was it? McGinley, sorry.
Sorry, Emma and Aisling.
Okay, and our last speaker indicated is Councillor Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Happy to formally second the recommendation and to thank officers for all the work that's been done since the notice of motion was brought forward. SDLP will nominate Councillor John Boyle. Thanks.
Okay, so that's Councillor Boyle nominated by the SDLP. Okay, members, that concludes item 8. So item 9 then is the mobile tender. And Connor's taking that.
Thanks, Chair. This is to advise members with regard to the outcome of a procurement exercise related to the appointment of a consultant team to undertake a review of the draft optimum remediation strategy soon to be published by DERA NIEA with regard to the illegal landfill site at Maboy. Members will be aware of the legal landfill site located at Maboy and activities undertaken by DERA and NIEA to identify the types, quantity and impacts of the waste buried there, and in consideration of this to prepare a draft optimum remediation strategy that will be issued for public consultation. In consideration of the above, Council subsequently resolved to tender and procure a suitably qualified consultant team to undertake the review and prepare a report for consideration by Council that will in turn inform the response provided by Council to the consultation. Council used the Eastern Shires Procurement Organisation ESPO consultancy framework to secure the appointment, given the timeframes involved and the requirement to ensure the exercise was fully compliant with purchasing requirements. There are circa 27 consultancies listed on the framework, with all invited to register on the eTenders platform and to submit responses to the ITT issued, with several organisations, including Tetra Tech and RPS, declining as they form part of the team appointed by DERA NIA to take forward the draft optimum remediation strategy. One tender was returned by the closing date on the 12th of April 24. Subsequently evaluated using the criteria set out in the ITT by the evaluation panel as listed in the report. The panel were satisfied that the tender submitted was compliant with a consensus moderation exercise taking place on Tuesday the 3rd of April to review individual scores and to sign off on the scoring exercise. And the panel subsequently agreed to recommend the award of tender to AECOM in the sum of £53,810. Whilst only one submission was received, the early rates charged against each of the team members assembled by AECOM to complete the commission were benchmarked against published rates on the ESPO framework and considered to be on market and value for money. Full details of the procurement exercise have been provided with a completed tender report available for review in line with Council's procurement procedures. No budgets are earmarked for these exceptional types of costs, consultancy fees as part of the rates estimate process. So this will represent an unbudgeted financial pressure. The lead finance officer will endeavour to identify the funds for this as part of the 2023-24 year-end outturn report to be presented to Governance and Strategic Planning Committee in June. Members are therefore asked to award a tender for the review of the draft optimum remediation strategy to AECOM in the sum of £53,810.
Thank you, Connor. Councillor Duffy.
Good Chair, and also thank you to Connor for the report. Just on behalf of Sinn Féin, to welcome the appointment of the consultant, whose work will be an independent review and also scrutiny to the environmental agency's strategies. So thank you again, and we are happy to propose the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Alderman Middleton.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, Connor, for the report and the work that has been done to date to appoint a consultant. On behalf of the DEP, we very much welcome this step forward, and I would be happy to second this. Thank you.
Okay, members. Take it that's unanimous. So That then takes us, members, to item 10, and that's the potential play projects development, and Karen is taking this.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, the purpose of this report is to request design development investment to support the recommendations and findings of the play plan and some of the previous approved projects that were agreed as outlined in the report. Members, you will be aware of discussions that we've had over the last number of years in relation to the play strategy and indeed the list of potential play projects that were to be included as part of the Levelling Up play programme application, which was unfortunately not successful. Members, we still have agreed that we will try and take forward the play plan in full. And members, you will have noted from our recent service plan presented at April that the service improvement outcomes include completing internal design development for 10 play areas across each of the DEAs. Members, the GI officers plan to set up bi-monthly meetings with the DEA members to progress with the approved list of play areas, and this has begun already in some of the DEAs and will include all the others. And following on from consultation based on the previous DEA workshops, there's a list of projects contained at 3.6 to 3.13 of your report in terms of projects for each of the DEA areas. Members, officers are actively engaged in the process of re-engagement on the prioritised list of projects, taking into consideration issues such as lands and planning permission, etc. And also we believe that further consultation with community leaders, local residents and stakeholders to develop suitable projects from concept design to shovel ready is necessary when potential sources of funding have been identified. So members, in terms of the recommendation before you, members were asking that we approve £25,000 towards design development investment to support the recommendations and findings from the play plan. And again, as you can see from section 4 of your report, we will identify that within existing budgets. I'm happy to take any comments that anyone has. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Have Alderman Hussey indicated?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. 3 items stand out to me. And I'm taking them sort of in reverse order. With regard to Strabane, the 2 identified sites, I'm assuming are the sites that went into the original application. Has there been any engagement on that with the Neighbourhood Renewal Partnership? Because I also sit on that because part of Derg lies into the Strabane town. But I know there were concerns that the Neighbourhood Partnership had identified other priorities. And I wonder, should there be some engagement with the people in the area as to what they feel needs doing? They didn't feel, if those are the 2 original, I'm not sure of the exact location, what they had on their priority list, but that needs to be addressed. The second one would be under 3.12, which is Spurn, and I don't see Vaughan's Home included in there, and it's been talked about quite a lot, obviously, and it impacts on the Derg because it basically services the Derg area, although it's located in Spurn. And finally, with regard to Derg, no problem with the 3 that are there. But can I assume that Killen is progressing and beyond this? That Mitchell Park, we know that Mitchell Park will go when hopefully the works are undertaken there. And with regard to the Castle Park, the upgrade there lies within the levelling up scheme that exists at present. And could I emphasise one more thing within that Castle Park scenario? The project is leading towards an upgrading from a local to a neighbourhood park. And as we know, within the criteria for a neighbourhood park, toilet provision is one of the criteria. And I'm wondering, have any officers looked at the potential for that if we're moving from assessment of the facility being local, moving from local to neighbourhood? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, through you, Chair. Members will recall when we were preparing the UK Levelling Up Fund application, it seems quite a while ago, that we did extensive engagement with all the members and all the DAs, and with a very fast turnaround time. And the list that is there, okay, was the list that was agreed, okay, with members in each DEA. And whilst we talked about 2 projects in each DA and setting aside a reserve project, okay, so that list was informed by previous discussions with engagement with members, and it's not. It's some way going to address the play plan. So that's the kind of current list that we're working off at the moment. We do accept, okay, that things change and priorities change, okay. So there is a degree of flexibility around that in terms of introducing new projects. But from a starting point, I think what we want to do as an officer team and with members in the community is kind of start off with what we agreed with, okay. In terms of engagement, yes, there was some criticism leveled at council officers at the time in terms of there wasn't sufficient engagement when the UK Levelling Up application was put in. And I recall talking to all the strategy managers across the entire city and district, okay, and explaining why. And unfortunately at that time, the lack of engagement was really got to do with the limited time constraints that we faced in terms of putting in a significant application. So what is proposed going forward is that when we do meet with communities and representatives, okay, that we will talk to the various different strategy managers and growth partnerships. I've had some discussions with the chairs of the rural partners through the Rural Issues Group. And probably on a project by project basis, we will discuss those, okay, in terms of the design development as we go along. So that's, I suppose, where we are with it. And I do accept, okay, there was a gap there in terms of the inclusion of a wider engagement, but that was really just got to do with time constraint members, at that time. So that's the question number 1. With regard to question number 2, Vaughan's Home. Yeah, Vaughan's Home is not on that list, and we have talked about that in terms of progressing it, and we do accept, that work needs to be done there as well. This list isn't exclusive because there's a lot of work that's actually going on at the ground at the moment. As you know, we're on site in Cumber, we're doing improvements in Lairmount. We're also doing improvements in other play parks. At the time of writing, okay, we did improvements at Eglinton. We built a new play area as well. So there is work going on. As you appreciate, there's the Castle site. It'll see the end of the Mitchell site. We are talking to the various different communities in Glebe, okay, etc. And then in terms of the other areas, okay, like Carlton Drive and Ballycomal, we have progressed design and development at Ballycomal, because this was probably an alternative site looking at that entire facility, which we will bring back a subsequent report on the Strabane play facility. And that basically came out of members' concerns about looking at the Beachmount site at that time. So we're working away on that, and we're hoping to come back very soon. A number of these sites are not within council ownership, okay, and it has taken us a degree of time to get permission from the Housing Executive to confirm that A, they're willing for us to go in there and actually start this dialogue with them at an early stage. So that's kind of where we are with it at the moment, So I suppose what we want to do between now and October is to try and get all these projects up to a state of readiness, and as a very first tranche, get those packaged up to state of readiness. Should funding become available, that we can start then delivering them. Oh yeah, in terms of toilet provision, yeah, normally with district parks, there's a criteria to have toilet provision, but the toilet provision that we would promote in these areas is provision that's kind of managed provision, as opposed to putting a toilet block within an area. There are quite a lot of problems associated with toilet provision if they're not manned. So an example of district park would be Brook Park. There is toilet provision there, but that toilet provision forms part of the cafe. We did take an item to committee at some stage looking at within these parks, could we look at putting in portaloos, and that was costed at the time. And I think the recommendation was to come back and that in certain sites there needs to be a more bespoke approach to it. So there's a fair bit of work to do in terms of looking at toilet provision, in terms of looking at its management and maintenance going forward. I am mindful of, within the Castledorg area, that there is the toilet scheme as well, okay, and the proximity of toilets within relatively short walking distance of the castle site. And I don't know, would members feel that that is sufficient, or is it that there should be more bespoke toilet provision within these sites? And if that is the case, then we would need to think about the resourcing of these in terms of how we open and close them, clean them, etc., and service them, etc.
Thank you, Colin, through you, Chair. I mean, I'm only quoting the toilet scenario on the basis of what we were shown as the criteria within the strategy that we received. So, it's within the strategy. And when you talk about neighbourhood, from local to neighbourhood to district, it's a requirement within that. I'm happy to propose the recommendation subject to engagement with Strabane Neighbourhood Renewal Partnership on the issues that they may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Just by way of comment too, see regarding the community toilet scheme in Castledare, it has been raised in this committee a few times. People come into the town and there's no signage at all indicating, that there is a community toilet scheme in Castledare, advertising the businesses that are utilising it, so maybe that's something that could be addressed going forward.
Through you, Chair, members, it's actually our environmental health department through Health and Communities that are doing that, but we'll certainly make them aware of it. I do know that because we had certainly had some discussion at SLT in terms of that particular issue around signage, so we will follow that up with the relevant health service. Thank you.
Next indicated, sorry, Councillor Barry, are you wanting on this issue? Well, I'll put you down here. It's just there's people indicated before you. Alderman Middleton.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, Karen, for the report, and to the team for the work that you've done. We've all previously spoken about play value and how important it is for our children across the whole district, socially and developmentally, so it's really good that we're having this conversation, that it's on the table today. I'm really glad to see Killaloe on the list. A question that I get asked beyond regularly is, do council not know that we don't have a park, or that our park provision is nearly nil, and what about our children? So I'm really glad from a Faughan perspective to see that there, and it's good now that next time I'm approached, which will probably be sometime this week, I can advise we were discussing it, and it is on the list. I just wanted to ask a question, if I can please, that based on the fact that Ross Downey Park scored the lowest play value over the district, and that was before the remaining play equipment was removed on the basis of health and safety, therefore arguably leaving zero play value for Ross Downey, can the council confirm that Ross Downey doesn't require planning permission, and therefore part of the £25,000 will be used to cost the park based on the recent consultation? Thank you.
Okay, and through you, Chair, members will recall Ross Downey Play Park. There was an item that was brought to committee earlier this year, in terms of approval of the design concepts, and there's actually an item today just giving some feedback on that, where we 60 people who attended, and obviously everybody's very supportive of the designs that have been done by Helen in-house in that regard. We're of the mind that there was a play area there, and therefore it should be permitted development to put back in a new play area. And some of the money that is going to be proposed for this is that we've already done some of the survey work there, is to actually get the facility costed to bring it to the next stage of readiness, And then at the very least, we know what the designs look, we've engaged, we don't see planning as an issue, and then we have a quantum of cost as to what it might look like. So that's where we are with Ross Downey Play Park presently.
Okay, Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. I don't know, do you have a seconder? I haven't. I'm content to second the proposal. And Chair, just on your own comments there, I knew Karen was going to mention it was Health and Communities directed. There was a sign. There was a sign for the toilets, which was on the building, which has now been tossed. So that's where there was one sign on the old toilet block in Castlereagh, and that's been levelled. So there's no sign anymore to notify the toilet scheme in the town. But again, welcome the report and be more parochial in regards to the old Stavan end there, in regard to the Spairn site there. I know that former Alderman Breslin and Devaney had put a lot of work in trying to get that site sorted in Ballinagorry, and content that that'll be put forward. And again, in regards to Douglas Bridge, we know there's development in Douglas, houses ongoing, and Plum Bridge, again, we had a planning application there for more development there, so content that those sites are supported in the Spairn DEA. And again, as Alderman Hussey has stated, in regards to getting Kiln added on to the list, we say, well, I know we have factors to see what needs to be done with that site, but again, it's not ideal, as you have stated previously, Colin, and we know that it's not the perfect site for it, and we would be seeking an additional site. Again, it's not forgetting where there's no provision. So again, we have the issues with Drumliga and the Derg DA, where we have zero provision there. But touching again on it there, within the Spairn and the Derg DAs, the old Staban Council, with the exception of Staban Town, we only have local play provision. We have no sites apart from one in Staban, which is either a neighbourhood, I believe it's a neighbourhood, not a district site. So again, given the third settlement in the City and District and the fourth settlement in the City and District, I would be minded that both the Castle site and Vaughan's Home have got to be upgraded to become at least neighbourhood, if not district-wise play facilities. And as Alderman Hussey has touched upon, some form of toilet provision. We still have that provision at Cranagh. We still have provision up at Barnes Gap. You know, there are ways. It doesn't have to be a Portaloo or something, but it is something, and you do still get it. I mean, I know it's touching on it, but I was approached by someone in Castleberg in regards to stated that there are at least 27 people in the town who are double incontinent there, and in regards to the facilities there and the toilet scheme, and I know it's the other committee, and I accept that, but it's just not cutting it. So again, if you are trying to make an area attractive and for someone to come with children to a larger play facility, you know, you've got to have some sort of provision there for after playing maybe for 5 or 10 minutes, children have to go and use the facilities, and we have no facilities there. So I'm not expecting it on the local play provision, but again, when we're getting a neighbourhood or district, as Alderman Hussey stated, it's in the legislation, or it's in the requirements there, or what should be there. So I do feel that the Castle site and the Vaughan's Home has to be looked at. Again, it's maybe not on this as sitting here, but it's got to be looked at to raise them to at least neighbourhood provision, if not district-wise. So other than that, Chair, I'm content enough to second the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. And Councillor Deeney.
Garmilga Chair. So it was just to say the play provision across all these DAs are so needed, as we can see when everyone talks about their own area. I know specifically the areas identified in the water side are so in need, in particular Carnegie, and I know Councillor Jackson will be very happy to see that. And I just think the bi-monthly meetings are very welcome to progress the play project, so I think that's a great idea. So Garmilga.
And Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. It's just if it's appropriate to ask at this stage, I was just wondering what the state of play is with progress at the Mugga Provincial Villas, where I've heard there's been a bit of vandalism recently, and also the Bog Park and Sion Mills.
Through you, Chair, Councillor Barr, both those issues are being taken forward by Health and Communities, so I can perhaps ask that we can get an update tomorrow at Health and Communities Committee, if that would be helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Riley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on behalf of the SLP, just to welcome today's item on the agenda, and I suppose to reflect this was a huge piece of work in the last mandate, and right across each of the DEAs, councillors took the opportunity to listen to members of the public about what mattered to them in terms of play in each of the areas, and these were the ones that came back. Like in the water side, obviously Councillor Deeney's touched on the value of play provision in Corrynear and Tully Alley, and I know I've been in touch with people in Ross Downey as well about the need for play provision there. So across every DEA, there's clearly issues, and the importance of play for young people is certainly something that the SDLP fully recognises and supports. So happy with the recommendation, Chair, before us this afternoon, and to thank officers for getting us to this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Riley. Members, I take it we're all in agreement with those recommendations. So that then, members, takes us to item 11, which is the ESB charge points, and that's Connor who's...
Purpose of this report is to seek members' approval to proceed with upgrades to existing ESB e-car charge points across the city and district as proposed by ESB. Members may be aware that ESB previously installed a number of EV charge points across the city and district through a project originally led by DRD, now DFI. The majority of locations, public car parks, were controlled by DFI DRD at that time, with council not party to any discussions or agreements relating to the installation of the equipment. Consideration of the above, council will now be required to agree terms with ESB for these charging equipment located on council properties, with ESB keen to enter into new agreements with each of the councils across NI for the long-term management and maintenance of the upgraded charge points. ESB proposes part of this process to replace a number of their 22 kilowatt fast charge points, and also propose.
Chair, I'm happy to propose that if nobody's got any comment.
Okay, that's proposed by Councillor Boyle, seconded by Alderman Hussey, but I know that Alderman Hussey, you want to come on this item? So
Yeah, just very quickly, for clarification, Albert Street Car Park, it talks about an upgrade from 22 kilowatts to 100. There are 2 charging positions there. Is it both of them being upgraded?
Chair, that's my understanding, but I'll clarify that.
Okay, members, nobody else indicated on that, so items 12 to 24, members, are for information, and I'll go through them one by one. I know there's a couple of officers who want to address them, so item 12, I know that Kathy's coming on that one for us, which is the climate programme update. So, go ahead, Kathy.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. So what I've just done is prepared a few slides as opposed to going through the report, if that's all right, Chair. So I present this afternoon on an update on the work that's been going on with myself and my colleague Michelle Murphy as to the climate programme in Council. So at this stage, I think it's useful just to reflect on the drivers for action. Obviously, we're very familiar with the climate and ecological crisis here in the city and district and the need to act. And also, though, we want to emphasise the benefits that can come from delivering on climate action and linking with the Sustainable Development Goals and what they can deliver for the wider communities in terms of health and well-being and economic prosperity across the city and district. So that's very much where we have embedded and used that as a framework going forward for the climate programme. In terms of the strategic context, there has been a number of changes locally, and obviously we're very much aligned to the global context and what we're doing here within the city and district in terms of acting locally and thinking globally and aligning with things like the Paris Agreement. But in terms of our local strategic context, things have moved on apace with the Climate Change Act, which was passed in 2022. The Climate Change Act aligns with our own climate pledge, which I'll talk about shortly, but essentially what the Act does is it sets a requirement on the Northern Ireland Executive and departments to create 5-yearly carbon budgets to bring the province to 46% methane reduction and net zero emissions by 2050. So aligned to that, we have public body reporting duties then, which council are subject to, and they are currently going through consultation stage in terms of exactly what they will look like, but council will have to report on our greenhouse gas emissions and our associated mitigation actions and also our climate adaptation actions. The climate adaptation we already do. We've had a climate adaptation plan in place now for a number of years, so we're ahead on that, and the mitigation I'll talk about shortly. Alongside that, there will be creation of new structures in Northern Ireland. So there will be a new Northern Ireland Climate Commissioner based within the Northern Ireland, the Executive Office, and a Just Transition Commission as well. And that's currently going through development within the departments. So coming back more locally, as members will remember, we presented our net zero roadmap for the city and district last year. There was extensive work done from our partners in Your Climate Strategy, which essentially established our carbon footprint for the city and district. And as members can see, there our biggest emissions and our biggest sort of baseline comes from our land use. And given our current emission baseline, we will have used up our global share of carbon budgets within 4 years. And that's essentially where we would hope to align with things like the Paris Agreement, the UK Climate Change Act, and indeed our own climate pledge here to be net zero by 2045. So these figures require updating. Even just this afternoon, obviously looking at the new data that's come out from the waste emissions across the city and district, and it is very much a moving feat, but I suppose that this has been a really good exercise in seeing where we need to go and the key areas that we need to focus on across the city and district. So again, just to emphasise the multiple benefits from climate action, we have aligned our work to the SDGs, but also to look at, our natural capital benefits that are to be derived from delivering climate action, but also the cost savings, obviously during huge energy increases and general cost increases with materials. We are seeing with decarbonisation globally and within the UK and Ireland that there are huge cost savings to be had, as well as cost savings and insurance reduction costs to be levied from improved adaptation actions as well. So I'll not go through all of the items on this slide here, but it really is just a snapshot of how we can position wider climate action. We've tried to do that within the work that we're doing now in Council to be more around putting climate action as a benefit as opposed to something that we must do. In terms of our response, we obviously have our strategic growth plan within Council, which puts environmental wellbeing very much at the core, and looking at a thriving and sustainable city and district. And with that in mind, then we have looked at integrating that, the core principles of that, the Sustainable Development Goals, and our climate pledge into our climate programme, which is what we're delivering on at the moment. And that climate programme looks at these, what we call our core foundations, and each of those are represented here in terms of the key areas that we need to focus on in order to deliver on climate action and our climate pledge. And these are the areas then that we have sought to deliver programmes on over the last number of years, but going forward, these are the areas that we will focus on within our climate action plan. So again, just a quick snapshot of where we are in terms of what has been going on over the last number of years. We have our Climate Action Working Group, we have our All-Party Climate Emergency Working Group, of which members sit, and we have the All-Party Severe Weather Working Group, which as well looks at very much at resilience and community resilience, led by Denise and Anne Gallagher. And then all the other sort of strategies and plans that we've tried to align and integrate climate action into, because this is very much about making climate action business as usual. As I mentioned, we have our climate pledge. Council declared a climate emergency in 2019, and then in 2020 the climate pledge more or less committed us as a council with all our policies and plans, but also set that target of net zero and climate resilient city and district by 2045. In order to do that, we report into a number of national and European and global declarations and commitments, and we've also included climate and sustainability action into our local development plan and our city deal projects as well. So we have a climate and environment working group very much embedded within the City Deal programme to make sure that what we do now with our City Deal programme, that we embed climate smart sustainability and green infrastructure. Just a quick snapshot of some of our projects that are ongoing. We have our Acorn Farm. So we've secured lottery funding and LUF funding, over 6 million. And the premise of that is about sustainable food growing across the city and district, with lots of community programmes being run. And alongside that is the Acorn Farm Capital Project in St Colum's Park, which we're designing to climate smart standards, looking at passive house, BREEAM and whole life carbon assessments. And the whole life carbon assessment is the first of its kind in Northern Ireland. So it's very much a learning curve for us and the contractors, and it will provide a blueprint for potentially the City Deal projects and other projects going forward as well. We secured £200,000 through the Green Peace Plus bid for green clubs, and that's to extend the GAA Green Club programme across a number of clubs across the city and district. So it'll be potentially working with a soccer club, working with a rugby club, working with a GAA club. So it's on the premises of peace, but to develop green plans and to be able to get those clubs ready then for the funding that's coming out and that we're seeing already with lottery community funding, etc. We work with the Playhouse and secured £1 million for the Artitude project, which is to deliver art-infused sort of circular economy, climate projects within 6 different communities across the city and district, and there'll be artists in residence, and that's kicking off now. The launch is due next week. We also secured €50,000 from Creative Ireland project to deliver the Blueprint project, working with 2 flood affected communities, one in Newton Stewart and one in Eglinton, again working with an artist and to creatively take them through that process and their lived experiences, and that will culminate in an exhibition in the autumn, and that's 100% funded as well from the Creative Ireland team. Obviously, it's looking to community resilience and working very closely with our community resilience team. We work with the different communities around building their resilience plans and embedding climate and climate risk into those. So looking obviously to issues such as flooding, but working beyond that to look at heat and severe and general severe weather events as well, and building those into community resilience planning going forward. We've been working a lot with the business and investment teams in council and economic development, and worked with Invest NI to include climate action within our local decarbonisation fund that Invest NI are currently rolling out through Innovate UK. And then the Shared Island Community Climate Action bids were released recently, and that is 100% funding from the Republic of Ireland, working on a cross-border basis. So we work to support in a number of projects, including some of our own facilities and community projects in those applications, and we should find out in autumn if we're successful. And then the Climate Ready Communities proposal, which is a much wider proposal that I'm leading on with the partners listed here, which include the Red Cross, etc. And that's about creating climate ready locations and model communities in the city and district. So that will then be rolled out across the rest of the UK and Ireland. We're looking to the Shared Island Fund for those pilot communities. Upwards of 4 million is required for that pilot project, and hopefully we'll be able to go to the ministers with that in the autumn. So then the main piece of work really has been in around our Innovate UK funded project, which is Net Zero Derry and Strabane, from ambition to action. So we have our climate pledge, we have lots of ambition, but we recognise that we have a lot of enabling work to do, if we think back to that slide where the foundations are there, in order to actually take that vision and make it a reality. So we secured 300,000 from Innovate UK to establish the programme, which culminates in lots of different deliverables, as you can see here on the slide, some of which are around climate action plans, looking at our own policies and procedures in-house. But the main deliverables up until July 2025 includes the establishment of a climate commission for the city and district. So the Climate Commission is currently in a shadow commission. We have met up to 4 times now, actually. We're meeting next week as well. The terms of reference is agreed. We have appointed Professor Ian Montgomery from Ulster University as chair, and the commission is very much established to bring and connect all the key stakeholders together to collectively look at climate action, because we as a council can't do it on our own. So we need to work with all the key statutory agencies and our communities and our stakeholders in order to deliver on this. And as part of that as well, we are working with Your Climate Strategy, our partners in the programme, to do a climate action readiness assessment and to look at the more strategic baseline in terms of where we need to go. And the main work that will come out of the commission is that there will be a city and district sustainability and climate action plan, but also a green investment plan. So there will be a plan and a project pipeline that will identify what we need to do in the city and district, but there'll be an associated plan that will look at how much money we will need and a potential investment plan around how that will be paid for. So this is the commission as it currently sits. We have over 28 organisations currently sitting in the Climate Commission, and they range from, statutory agencies, senior government representatives from government departments to local community groups, Ulster Farmers Union, business in the community, etc. And we've business, we have the Invest NI in there, as well as the people such as the City of Derry Airport. So we've tried to be as representative as possible. This changes quite frequently. As the more people we meet, the more people come on board. So this will very much be an evolving commission, and we want it to be as such. We want to make sure we're including as many people around the table as possible. Recognise we don't want it to become too unwieldy. So within that, we've already set up a number of clusters. to focus in on specific issues. So we have an education cluster that has already met twice that is focusing in on the decarbonisation of our education sector in the city and district. And we have 6 exemplar schools working with the Education Authority on that with the university. And we also have a health and community cluster as well. And the scope of the commission is very much to connect all those different agencies and different stakeholders together, agree the climate action plan, which they will co-design with us, and essentially deliver on that and promote best practice across the city and district. Moving on then, before I finish up, there's a few other smaller items that we included within the programme which are more specific to council, such as a climate screening process where we look at screening all council policies, plans and procedures for climate action. Alongside that, we have an SDG tag tool which looks at how we will make sure that all the work that we do in council aligns to the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're also rolling that out free of charge to local community groups as well. And then in terms of action planning, we're doing our own mitigation plan in council, because we have to lead by example and we have to reduce our own emissions. So we've worked with Climate in Northern Ireland, similar to what we did with our adaptation plan. So we're the first council in Northern Ireland to do a mitigation plan, and we have established our baseline as a council. We're just waiting on a few wee pieces of data coming in this week, but essentially that looks at our fleet, waste, energy, procurement, estates and digital services. And the next step then is, over the summer now, we're going to work with our Climate Action Working Group to establish our mitigation plan, so how we reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions as a council across our own services and operations. We are also currently developing a sustainable procurement strategy for council, or responsible procurement strategy as we sometimes refer to it as well, and that's very much based on the principle of social value, but also in terms of how we procure our goods and services to make sure that they align with our sustainability agenda and that we're reducing our scope 3 emissions as a council as well. So in terms of the way forward, obviously we will have our own adaptation or mitigation plan, climate action plan for the city and district, and all those other sort of enablers such as our procurement strategy and climate screening tools. And really in terms of achieving success, it's about bringing all those people together as we're currently doing with the Climate Commission, and both within House and Council through our Climate Action Working Groups and our All-Party Climate Emergency Working Group. And this slide really just demonstrates how we try to extend our reach internally to all departments. So we have good representation on that climate working group from across departments in council, and we've excellent senior leadership support as well. And this just shows how our aims of our sustainable, thriving, net zero, climate resilient city and district is very much embedded across all that we do in council. And that's everything from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, for that presentation. I have Councillor Deeney indicated.
Thank you. It's just to say thank you, Kathy. Just to see those key areas of focus, they were really useful, and where our focus should be in our climate action plan in the city and district. Obviously reducing our carbon impact is essential, and the presentation was really informative on how council is currently doing this and how they're planning to do this in the future, to meet our targets. And I was really glad that you brought up Acorn Farm, because I walked past it this morning and it's seemed to have just popped up now out of nowhere. So oh sorry, I think I have a declaration of interest as well for being on the All-Party Climate Action Group.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Deeney, and I have Alderman Kerrigan.
Thanks very much, Chair, for allowing me in. I declare an interest in regards to that group. Now I missed the last meeting, Kathy, but in regards to, I see the report, and I know there's a massive amount of work has went into the report, and do have wee difficulties and wee issues, but that's just ongoing. In regards to there, I mean, even that report that was brought in at the start of the meeting there, you know, has our glass been sent to Belgium to try and get it recycled? Is that one of the things that I sort of effectively picked up there? Surely that's, you know, something shouldn't be happening. Yeah, you know, how is that cost effective? But not even cost effective, you know, environmentally end of things there. You know, so there's still work to be done there. Have you had much engagement there in regards to the like of the Farmers Union in regards to that? Because I mean, the like our council area, the vast majority of it is agriculture. And you know, it's getting the basis from that. And I do see the reports there, and I do see in regards to commenting there is that, sorry, I've missed that. Turned it over there is 28%. Back. That's 28%.
No,
From junior. There was 28% in regards to the emissions there. It's noted there in regards to agriculture. But then again, is that allowing for any mitigating? Because I would be minded agriculture is one of the few things there that actually mitigates the CO2 emissions. And I suppose there's one thing what I would do, but in regards to cutting our CO2 emissions, but mine go down as popular, I'd close an airport out of the road. But I would say that would cut right lot of emissions in one foul swoop. But maybe that's just not for today. But again, it does have the concerns because it's ongoing in regards to the environmental issues and in regards to flooding, as is touched on there. And again, that's linking into even the Derg Active thing in regards to there's issues in regards to Mitchell Park and how that will be mitigated because that is a floodplain. And, you know, so it's linking in how all this ties in together. But no, thanks very much. There's no real questions, but I do understand there's a massive amount of work. And again, I do always have a wee like, because it always seems to be the agricultural sector gets a wee dig out of this. But well, that's my pickup on it, and I know it's not intentionally with you, Kathy, but it's just always a wee sore point for me. But no, thank you very much for the work that's went into it.
And Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kathy, as well for the presentation and the updates. It is really interesting, and I know other councillors have touched on relating this item back to previous items on the agenda. There's hardly an item on the agenda that isn't affected by this in some way, including the most recent one we did in relation to EV charging cars and the opportunities that are there to make people or help people make the change from diesel or petrol to electric cars. So it is really interesting, and it is good to get an update. I was down in St. Collins Park House this morning at an event and went past the Acorn Forum as well, and it was good to see it is progressing well. You know, I think that's a good example of various different public sector funding all being drawn into our council area, you know, to help make positive change. So, thank you, Kathy, and the SDLP are happy to, you know, to note the report and to continue to support it. Thanks.
And Alderman Hussey.
Thanks, and thanks, Kathy, for the report. I have to disagree with something that I see printed in front of me. We're the first generation to feel an impact of climate change and the last generation that can do something about it, Barack Obama. We're not the first generation that has experienced climate change. And I mean, I think the historical records show that, but we are the first generation that has said, look, we're going to have to do something about this. And I look at the diagram, the Commission, Sustainability and Climate Commission, and I think to myself, you know, a committee designing a horse that ends up as a camel. It seems very, very overpopulated. I know you possibly need a lot of elements in, but is it sensible to bring them all into the one scenario rather than sectioning them off to work within their own specific areas? Because I think a lot can be done on a smaller basis. You know, if a lot of people are doing it, you know, it's 1,000 cuts that can perhaps solve the issue. I totally respect the desire, but the methodology sometimes I wonder. We're a local council, you know, let us do what we can do well, and, you know, join in certainly with others in cooperation or whatever, but concentrate on what we can do and what we can get our residents to do, because they are the solution to the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. And Kathy would like to come back in there.
Yep, thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so in terms of the methodology around the Climate Commission, that has followed the PCAN and work that was done with University of Leeds, which it looks at place-based climate action across the whole of the UK. And what we did was we looked at the best practice that, as I mentioned, was done throughout the rest of the UK and tweaked it slightly, I have to say, for Northern Ireland, because we are very different, as you can imagine, in terms of even our government agencies and responsibilities. So what we did was we looked at that, but then, as you quite rightly pointed out, Alderman Hussey, there is a lot of people around that commission table, and that's where the clusters then come in. So you have those very focused clusters that will really deep dive into the issues around, for instance, health, community, retrofitting homes. And what we imagine will happen and what we're planning for is that there will be task and finish groups within those clusters that will look at specific things, as you quite rightly said, to get things done on the ground with our local communities.
Okay, thank you, Karen, for that. Members, item then 13, and we had the presentation on it earlier, is the RAP Connections Options Appraisal. Item 14 is the building control update. Item 15 is building cost information service construction data. Item 16 is the Craigan Reservoir update. Councillor Boyle.
Just briefly, Chair, obviously I note the report and appreciate the report very much, Karen, through you, Chair. I think it would be useful, Chair, to give us a bit further understanding of some of the issues here. If we could possibly convene a meeting with the interested parties and whatever interested elected representatives might want to come along to that meeting, so as we can understand some of the challenges as they relate perhaps to the people at Craigan Country Park in particular. A note in the report, for example, there's talk here of lowering the water level, and I think that's something that's very important for us to try and understand and how that might impact on the business of Craigan Country Park. So can I propose that we do convene a meeting, Chair, and invite any elected representative who might want to come along, and then we can maybe tease out some of the other issues. But I'm pleased to see the progress that we're making in this as well. I don't want that meeting to delay what we're doing, but I think it's important that we understand that as elected representatives, there's a lot in this, as we know. So if everybody's okay with that, could that be arranged, please?
Okay, and Councillor Duffy is looking in.
Chair, and no, we're happy to second that as well. We believe that a workshop would involve the stakeholders and just sort of iron out the detail would be very helpful at the moment. And just they thank officers just for the work thus far, and thank you.
Yep, through you, Chair, members more than happy to organise a workshop for elected members and involve Craigan Country Park and indeed our officers, and we can arrange as well for the engineer and consultant who undertook the Section 10 report to be there in order to provide any information that members might want to ask. And certainly, as the report outlines, we've been having ongoing engagement with Craigan Country Park in terms of these matters, and so we will try and arrange that as soon as we possibly can. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, that was a proposal from Councillor Boyle, seconded by Councillor Duffy, and I presume we're all in favour of that. So we'll move then to item 17, which is proposed disabled parking bays. Item 18 is the flooding update, and Alderman Middleton.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in. It goes without saying that flooding still remains a very, very serious concern for so many of our residents. And I've said this before, but our residents should not have to panic when there's heavy rainfall. We have heavy rainfall quite a lot, and I can't imagine how stressful it is living with that fear that your whole house is going to flood or everything you own is going to just disappear after a storm. May I just ask if we can please seek some timeframes for Drumahoe and Eglinton in regards to the flood alleviation schemes, please? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, we're happy to ask the department for those.
Councillor Riley.
I was just going to second that if it needed seconded, Chair, but yep, absolutely. Timelines is what's required. Thanks.
Okay, members, so item 19 then is the Hazelbank play area designs. 20 is the mobile update. 21 is burial charges non-resident. Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I looked at that on there, and I have put forward a wee proposal on there. Now, again, I'll put it forward to this committee. I've sent it through to Jill, but I'll give her a wee minute. And it's more Well, I'll read out what I have put forward and it will come up on the screen. Given the report on the costs of burials across all of the councils in Northern Ireland, proposal to increase the cost for non-residential burial as below. Purchase of a plot to 1100, first opening to 850, second opening to 800, these being equivalent to or below the average cost across the other 10 local councils in Northern Ireland. Additional revenue to be invested in the maintenance of the council-controlled cemeteries. I just feel that whenever it is non-residential, I do feel that it's something that we're maintaining it, and it's an ongoing issue in regards to maintenance of cemeteries, and we do get it continually about the grass isn't cut, and we're told we don't have the crews, and we're told we don't have the staff to do it, and therefore I'm minded then, if it's a residential or if it's already a resident and a ratepayer within the council area, I have no difficulty with it. That's just my figures, as in I've averaged out the figures and I'm minded that I'm below. The average cost of a burial plot across the other 10 councils is 1183. And I've mentioned 1100. The average cost of a first opening across the other 10 council areas is 850 on the dot, and the average cost for a second opening 79980. So I've went with 800 there. That's just figures I'm putting forward, but I just feel that it can be, and the money potentially could be put back into that department. But I'll wait the officers' views on it.
Through you, members and Chair, clearly it's a matter for the committee to decide what they want to do in terms of a proposal that's put before them. In terms of the proposal, what we could do in terms of this is take this away this month and actually be able to actually bring you back a report next month, which adds in the potential income, etc., that might be associated with that, and that might give all of the members of the committee a little bit more time to consider the proposal today. But again, it's purely a matter for members to decide what way they want to deal with it.
I'm content with that, Chair, if you're...
Yeah, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. I have sympathy with what Alderman Kerrigan's looking at there. We're not talking about our own residents here, we're talking about non-residents. And when the report comes back, if it's agreed by committee, I'd like to have an indication of numbers of non-resident burials that occur. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Boyle.
Straightforward, Chair. Look, we wouldn't be in a position to make a decision in relation to this. Clearly, it's the first time we've seen it. We would have, our colleagues would want to be seeing it as well, so appreciate where you're coming from, Alderman. So I think it would be appropriate to buy everybody a bit of time to think about these particular matters. So if that is possible, if you're okay with that, Alderman, I think we'll work that way with it.
Okay, and Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair. And just on a similar vein there to Councillor Boyle, we would need time to discuss that with our party colleagues as well. So we wouldn't be in a position to support this today.
And through you, Chair, members, we can do that. And obviously, in order to sort of, if you like, calculate any potential income for council or whatever, we would use that based on the I suppose over the last number of years, how many burials we've had from out of the area, etc. So we can do that. I'm hoping that we can bring it back next month. It just depends on the scale of the work. It might need to come to the following committee, but certainly we'll bring it back as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Alderman Hussey.
The whole issue of non-resident, I suppose, if it's somebody who is a family member and has moved away and is living somewhere else, and the family plot is actually here, all of that sort of thing has to be taken into consideration, but I'm sure the officers will take that on board. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, and Alderman Kerrigan has indicated that he's happy with that course of action. So item 22 then, members, is the Realm Project update and engagement plan. I know that Colin wants to come in on this.
Yep, through you, Chair, members, if I perhaps very quickly step you through the report, and then Colin can come in and give a little bit of information. So basically the purpose of the report is to update members on the Realm project, and we'll give you a very short presentation on the project in order to show you really what it means in practice. So remember, we we expressed interest to the Executive Office in relation to this project back in January 2019. And really the whole purpose of it is to maximise connectivity in and around the neighbourhoods within the urban village area, and also to build upon and add value and increase connectivity between some of the relevant capital regeneration projects that have been delivered within the wider urban villages area over the last 10 years. The overarching aim of the project is to provide a high quality environment connecting these and other visitor attractions in a more coherent and connected shared space. And members, you will be aware that the urban villages area covers the Bogside, Fountain and Bishop Street areas, and it's a TO project. So members, we have established a working group that's led by council in order to develop the business case for this project, and that has involved a number of stakeholders across the community, across the urban villages area. We've developed early concept designs for the project, and again at this stage we will show them to you today, and indeed we propose to host 2 events within the local community, and indeed to mail drop to residents to get their views as well. Members, just in terms of finance, there isn't a budget allocated to the Realm project for capital delivery. However, the Executive Office have indicated the project is under consideration as part of a review of urban villages, and indeed the TEO have appointed a business case consultants to prepare the 5-stage business plan for this particular project. Members, it's anticipated that it could attract additional capital funding over the next 5 years, and again the high level costs to deliver the whole project would be in the order of 11 million. So therefore there would be a need to phase the project over time, and there will be obviously the normal technical, legal and financial implications to be worked through for each of the project areas. But if members are happy, I'll pass over to Colin and he can take you through some of the concept plans that we've developed for the project.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and through you, Chair. So members, the first slide shows the realm, and really what that is a storyboard, and it's an introduction. These designs that you'll see, the next number of boards they've been designed by Helen, our landscape architect in-house, and these are based on the architect drawings that are also as part of the pack. But the architect drawings are quite technical, to be quite honest with you, and not easy to decipher. So what we thought was appropriate was that what we would do is we take those and we would bring these into much more colourful, community-friendly language. And then when we go out and meet the various different communities in the Bogside and also in the Fountain, we'll be able to talk through those and explain them in detail by way of presentation. So the project is the realm, and it's really about this idea of connecting people and places together. And what we try to do is we're trying to move away from this concept of public realm, because more often than not, when you have a public realm, sometimes it doesn't have any ownership. And to get a realm or a space to work well, it needs to be informed by the people who live in that space and the people who are going to visit and walk through it. So a key thing and a key tenet to the evolution of these concepts have been working with the communities within those areas as a stakeholder group as such, okay, to guide us and in terms of what is important in the area and what we should be focusing our attention on. So there's been a significant amount of engagement in terms of informing this to date. Now, obviously what we need to do then, as Karen has talked about, we need to take this and disseminate it out to the people who live in that area, and that's the next stages. And in tandem with that, we'll have stakeholder groups, focused stakeholder group with members and also with statutory bodies which we've engaged with already, such as Road Service, etc. So the first one is in terms of a project introduction, and the key thing is about how we connect these spaces together through high quality public spaces, and areas of destinations that we want to connect are areas like the Gas Yard, Meanan Square, which will be developed, Museum of Free Derry, the Siege Museum, and the new cultural hub in the Fountain and Destined. So within that first page, you can see basically the realm is almost like a kidney that comes around the walls, okay? And then you have the central walls in the area, and then the wider central riverfront. So this project will, in time, it'll enhance what's going on in terms of the City Deal Central Riverfront. It'll enhance in terms of the work that's being done within the city walls, etc. But it's very much from a community basis and very much in terms of looking at how we improve those spaces outside those walls to connect those communities together. Next slide, please. So in terms of breaking this up, what we've done is we've worked at 5 different zones, okay? Zone 1 being the fountain, Zone 2 being towards the gas yard, Zone 3 being the front of the walls, previously known as Western Perspective. Zone 4 is Lower Bishop Street, and Zone 5 is Bennett Street. So that's kind of an overall site plan. So what we've done is we've looked at each of those zones in more detail. And just to, oh, sorry, next slide. Sorry. Okay, so if you consider Zone 1, which is the fountain, the starting point of this is at the dog leg as you enter the walls. We started at a starting point which was kind of midway between inside the fountain and outside the fountain, as opposed to starting at one end of the scheme and trying to meander our way through. And the community group thought that was a good idea. The proposal for the moment is to leave the dog leg alone. We're working with DOJ on that to see how that can be enhanced, if that's a thing that people want. The key thing is then when you come into the fountain, it's not very inviting, that entrance. Okay, and the pavements are in poor condition, the lighting is in poor condition. So we want to enhance that to be really, really high quality pavement that draws people into the fountain as you come along the bastion. We want to do some work with the allotments, the community space there and the basement. And then we want to take this down to the front of the walls. And then that brings us along the mugga that's there, which is being used by the community. But key to the community work within the fountain, okay, is the current site that's owned by EA. This site is currently used as a car park. And then every year it's used as a bonfire site. So what we've been working with the community is, and they've said, look, this is a key area that needs to be regenerated. And the discussions we're having at the moment is that needs to be brought back into a community event space. So we're in discussions with EA as to how that might happen. Then the key thing is when you come through Newgate is that, again, it's not very inviting. The pavements are very narrow. You're not drawn into the fountain. So what we want to do is we want to create a very, very large vista on the right-hand side, very, very high quality pavement that draws your eye right down to Newgate Centre. And what that'll look like is high quality pavement coming down, linked. And then when you come to the creche, there's a wall that's out there and it extends beyond and it blocks your sight line. So we're having conversations with the housing executive. Well, can that wall be put back and can we have a very, very good vista that'll draw people down to Newgate? Then obviously as you move through in terms of Kennedy Place, we want to link the Cathedral Youth Centre. Okay, we want to link that into the site. And then obviously we want to do improvements on Wapping Lane and Hawkins Street. The pavement style here, there'd be a different hierarchy of pavement. This would be, rather than granite pavement, this would be concrete aggregate pavement, but it would be higher quality. Particularly if you walk down Wapping Street, you can see, and we talked about dereliction earlier on, which would be very beneficial. That task force will come on, but also there's alley gates there that look bad. So with some minor improvements, I think we can enhance that area and make it much more inviting. And then obviously subject to engagement with DFI, we'd like a safe crossing to come across the Abercrombie Road. And then what that'll do is that'll bring you down the Bray, the old Tilly and Henderson. We know that the Martin brothers have very exciting proposals for that. And then ultimately we'd like another crossing that would link you down into Destin. And obviously we have plans separate to this proposal to look at how we can improve the aspect of the line going out to the new Daisyfield site. So that's the fountain. Then if you were to come the other way, on the outside of the dog leg, you traverse across the road and you can see the quality of work that's been done by Apex a number of years ago in Naylor's Row. It's really, really superb. If anybody remembers what that was like, but it invites you down. And once you come down Naylor's Row, you can either go left or right. So Area 2 considers if you go left towards St. Columb's Church. Again, access isn't great there. So what we would like to do is we'd like to improve access behind Alexander Court. And then what we'd like to do is we'd like to improve access along the Long Tower Street. It's a very, very nice amenity when you walk down there. There's very narrow pavements. It's a one-way. But it's a very, very nice setting when you walk down. When we come down to St. Colum's Hall, we want to improve then the visibility as you come down in under the flyover, okay, to come down to the Lecky Road in terms of just improving the look of it, the aesthetic of it. It's an area that's subject to antisocial behaviour. We want to work very, very hard to think about how we repurpose under the flyover itself. It's really quite a distractor in the area, to be quite honest with you. And then obviously notwithstanding the purpose of the flyover, there's quite a lot of heavy concrete walls that adjoin it, that cut through that landscape. And is there a way we can soften these to make it just much more sympathetic? And then key to that, we want to improve the access to the gas yard, which is a recipient project of urban villages. And then also we've been working with the executive office on the regeneration of Meanan Square in terms of linking that in. So that's as you go left when you come down to the bottom of Nixon's Corner. Zone 3, next slide. is if you go right, and that brings you then to the front of the walls. The path network there is very poor. I mean, the historic monument is fantastic. You get the best view of the walls when they're lit up and otherwise, but it's not attractive to draw you to the front of the walls in terms of connection across the Fawn Street. So we want to look at high quality public realm there, high quality public space, like what we have going down Nixon's Corner, Nixon's Road, to draw people down in front of the Bastion. The steps then lead you down onto Fawn Street. They're in very poor condition. They're not to the appropriate standard. They were done many years ago. We want to enhance those, and we want a much stronger line, a more defined line in terms of connecting people into that space. You come down Fawn Street, the pavement is very, very narrow. You're elevated sometimes, you're lower, you're looking very close to cars. We want to widen that pavement, okay, so it's a much more attractive and much more comfortable link from the city walls down into the bog side. And you can really see how this link then, when you come to the walls, how it'll bring you down William Street, and in terms it'll connect into all that high quality public realm. Obviously then some improvements in and around Beanan Square, which will be dealt with, and then just enhanced access and crossing. So that's kind of the zone 3. And then zone 4 is, next slide, is really looking at a bit of unfinished work. Bishop Street without was enhanced a number of years ago, and then the pavement just stops at Bennett Street. And in terms of engagement with the stakeholder group, they felt that that should be continued on in terms of attracting people down to the Long Tower Church. And then finally, in terms of zone 5, Bennett Street, again, conversation was about it just enhancing the pavement, probably just concrete aggregate pavement. Have a conversation with people in the area. Should it be opened up should it be kept as one way? It's cul-de-sac at the moment, or should it be opened up for true flow of traffic? And then the key to that is enhancing that link down to Abercorn Road, which received a regeneration scheme a number of years ago. So then next slide. And the next slide is just kind of an impression of what these things could look like in terms of high quality landscape and high quality pavement, etc., as a mood board. And then the final slide, next slide. Okay, the final slide is obviously what we want to do is we want to write out to people in the area, and there's a catch which is part of your pack to invite people to come and view these plans. So over the course of June, we want to do this work, engage with people, and we're very conscious that this is a very, very important piece of work in terms of presenting the scheme, listen to people, take on board their comments, seeing how we got it right. But also the key thing is this is a key thing in terms of the 5-case business plan that's been done by the Executive Office in terms of going forward. So look, that's kind of just a descriptive walkthrough of the site. So I hope it's clear, and I hope people can imagine the journey that I've taken them on. So thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Colin. I have Alderman Middleton indicated here.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen and Colin, for the very informative presentation. I look forward to further discussion. I think we need to have much further discussion on this. And I also think, as you have stated, it is beyond important that the residents have time to reflect, to read, to study the plans in detail, and to see what that means for their area, particularly because if we're going to improve their area, we want them to take ownership of that. But also, I note the point about safety, and I think safety is very much tied to personal perspective. So I'm thankful that the consultation work is being done. I'm not against the idea. I think, it's great to have positive change. We just need to ensure that residents and organisations are equally consulted. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Any other member? Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Chair. Not just briefly, and I understand the principle of what Alderman Middleton's talking about. Clearly, we all appreciate and agree that future consultation with the residents, in particular, who will take ownership of it if we get it right, and they won't take ownership if we get it wrong. So let's get it right in association and conjunction with them. That's not to pour cold water on this, because this is exciting. I think anything that improves the look and the feel of these neighbourhoods could only ever be welcomed by everybody. Finance is going to be key to this. It's noted that there isn't any identified at this point. However, the Executive Office people who are dealing with us say that might become available. And of course, if it does, then we'll not be looking at gift horse in the mouth, I wouldn't have thought. Very exciting, yeah, and you do get a feel in some of these neighbourhoods that, you know, they need a wee bit more TLC. They need a little bit of attention brought to them. The people who live in the Fountain, the people who live in these areas in the Bogside, they deserve it. They want it and they deserve it and they should have it. So the consultation element of this, I note there will be a couple of events for people to attend. I'm very interested actually to see what comes out of that and what local people have to say. And I really genuinely would put it out there for to encourage people to come along to these events and have their say and put forward their views, whether they're for or against particular elements of it. But it's important that we hear that. So I certainly wouldn't be pouring cold water on this. I welcome it, Colin. Thank you very much for the work so far. And I'm to say we look forward to see what's coming back out of that. But certainly the concepts that you've given here are exciting, and I, for one, on behalf of the SDLP, clearly I do welcome that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, members, or sorry, Councillor Duffy.
My good chair, just on behalf of Sinn Féin, just to thank Colin for his presentation. All exciting stuff, and it can be only welcomed. And I agree with the two previous speakers as well. Consultation is key, but sure, we know that, am I? And thank you all very much.
Okay, members, item 23 then is Rustowney Play Area Engagement Update, and we have Alderman Middleton. Go ahead, Alderman.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in again. As a party, we very much welcome the consultation work for the much-needed play park. A lot of my comments I'm going to make I've already made today, but we do need to remember that this play park was an existing park, and we do understand that Council had to remove items for health and safety reasons, but at this stage it's at the detriment of the local children. In light of my earlier comments regarding the park having zero play value, we as a party believe and would be strongly lobbying that Council must prioritise this park for completion. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And item 24 is Dara single-use FIPS. Councillor Deeney.
Chair, and I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. So we're obviously delighted to hear from DAERA on the intention to ban single-use vaping products in the north from April 2025. I've highlighted several times the environmental implications surrounding the increasing use of single-use vaping products and how they're not being recycled, with an enormous number of them being dumped into landfill every day. This is having a catastrophic effect on our environment, and although this was touched on briefly from the attached press release, the second point I would like to highlight again is the health implications and how single-use vaping products are so readily available to our young people through marketing and affordability. I know as a teacher, and speaking to teachers across the north, this press release is very welcome. I'm proud to now say that we are not standing by and watching this epidemic among our young people unravel before our eyes and not allowing young people to be the guinea pigs in this experiment. This is a massive step in the right direction, and I'm delighted.
Thank you, Councillor Deeney. No other member indicated. So, members, that takes us to the end of our items for information. So I need a proposer and seconder to go into committee of Alderman Kerrigan and Councillor Riley. We'll just wait for the indication from our IT officer there that we're ready to go.